First and foremost, thanks for pulling me out of the woodwork. And Anil, in fact, greeted me as though, somebody dead had walked in. He said, "You still looking the same?" I still don't know what he expected exactly, because anyway, I'm large as life, as you can see. And definitely following all the things Dr. Mishra said about pranayam and yoga, which is definitely the best preventive at the least expensive. It has nothing to do with what I'm going to tell you, but I do feel that since he raised it and a person of his stature talked about it, it is not to be just taken as wo hamara hai. It is something which will help you and must become a part of a daily routine of everyone, every human being. It is very, very useful, and particularly for the chest and for your breathing. Anyway, I wasn't called here to speak on that, and I wanted to just pull this back to a keynote address, which is, we are in the post-COVID era. This is going to stay with us, and it'll be something where doctors, public health professionals will always be on the lookout for outbreaks and epidemics. But we as people look to governments to make policies which will we are not talking about preventing epidemics and outbreaks, that's a different subject altogether, but where we are failing to protect and prevent ill health, we do require policies which will be able to take care of that. Are we doing enough is the question I want to raise, and World Lung Day, which is on 25th, is the opportune time to reflect on everything to do with the lungs, the upper chest cavity. And there are many, many things that affect us, and we all know about them. But by focusing on something, you realize how much it affects human beings and how much it affects people living in this country, and particularly people living in this city. India itself is changing. It's not just changing in terms of its demographics. We have stabilized our population by and large, which was unheard of 20 years ago, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago. But we have reached that kind of a plateau. The past momentum will certainly continue for many years to come, but people have brought their fertility down to less than 2.1 or 2.1 itself, which was unheard of. It used to be 3, more than 3, that kind of thing. Urbanization is huge. The way people are moving from rural to urban areas is going to affect the way we live. And the economic profile of people has changed. A lot of people have moved into the middle class, which calls for a different lifestyle change. But the health burden has also changed along with what has happened. Earlier, when I was in the Ministry of Health, and I was there for donkey's years before I went to Ayush, I remember I was in charge of national programs for so many national programs for disease control. They were all communicable diseases except for blindness. And everything was geared towards communicable diseases. Nobody ever talked about non-communicable diseases. There was a Dr. Bajaj in the Planning Commission, ex-AIMS, and he used to talk about diabetes. And people used to laugh when he left the room and say, ki garib logo ka to hota nahi hai, inko kya padi hai, diabetes ki baat kar rahe hain. But the fact remains that it has now become the #1 issue, because from a policy point of view, maybe we should have done something much, much earlier. We failed to do that. So all that upsurge of mosquito breeding leading to malaria, dengue, all those waterborne diseases because of sanitation, poor drinking water, all that is not over, but it has come down to almost 30%. But what has suddenly gone up to 55% is the non-communicable diseases of hypertension, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and chronic respiratory diseases, which has increased to more than 55%. It was never talked about at the time when I was in the health ministry in the 90s and early 2000s. And now it has become the #1 thing, but is not getting the attention that communicable diseases got, because it is seen as an individual problem. It is not seen in totality. Therefore, World Lung Day is a great occasion to think over what is affecting our lives and what we can do about it. Now, Number one, I would put this whole thing into three segments. And the first segment is controlling pollution. For protecting the health of millions, what matters the most is air quality. You may say a lot of other things are important, but if you have to look at millions of people, it is the air quality which makes a difference. And the pollution caused by burning of crop residue in the winter months, vehicular emission, construction and road dust, they're all responsible for causing severe and hazardous levels of air pollution, particularly in Delhi. And we managed to have a good AQI, as they call it. The AQI was fantastic during the G20 and unheard of for Delhi. But as Dr. Mishra said, as November comes and the Parali burning starts and many other things start, the smog and all, we will again go back not just to severe but to hazardous levels, and we will become known to be the most polluted city in the world, if not the several cities being most polluted. This affects mostly children, the elderly, and individuals who already have respiratory or cardiac problems, and they are the first groups to be affected by poor air quality. When the air quality, when AQI is high, government bodies generally encourage people to reduce physical activity, going outdoors, or even avoid going out altogether. According to the WHO survey, 1650 world cities were surveyed in August 22. The report came. Delhi was the worst of any major city in the world. Pollution also affects many NCR districts in India, having the worst and the highest death rate from chronic respiratory diseases and asthma, according to the WHO. Second, you come to behavioral factors. The prime example of this is tobacco smoking, vaping, and indiscriminately using steroids and antibiotics, which Dr. Mishra referred to. And that has become more rampant. I've done a study on unqualified medical practitioners. Today is not the day to talk about it, but pharmacists, chemists who over the counter, even today, despite there being a ban, are selling steroids and antibiotics, which people are popping in for a day or two, leading to multi-drug resistance, and then ultimately reducing your immunity and making you succumb to a vast number of diseases because you cannot then be treated. This is the second issue, which is behavioral. And the second subcategory was that. The third subcategory, which I think is very important, is what happens inside the homes. And that includes burning biomass, wood, dung, crop residue. It's used for cooking and heating in most rural areas, particularly in North India, everywhere. But in North India, because the houses are closed, the tendency to inhale that is much higher. These generate smoke inside the home and contain harmful pollutants, particularly carbon monoxide, which is extremely harmful for lung health. Now, Dr. Mishra didn't say it, and I think it behoves us to talk about what are the diseases that come in the wake of having respiratory problems. Tuberculosis is certainly number one, and it accounts for about a quarter of the global, India accounts for almost a quarter of the global TB cases, which makes it a primary health concern. And this affects primarily, not always, but primarily the lungs. The next is what we all talk about, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is a term used to describe chronic inflammatory lung disease that obstructs airflow from the lungs. And this is mainly caused due to tobacco smoking, exposure to indoor and outdoor pollutants, and the prevalence, as I said, in India is very high. And the third is bronchial asthma, where you have symptoms which can range from minor wheezing to life-threatening asthma attacks, which they're triggered by allergens, by cold air, by exercise, by smoke, by strong emotions even. People don't know that people who are susceptible need to be looked after, cared for, and the preventive measures have to be taken. This is also something that is lung-related in a big way. Then you have lung cancer, which Dr. Mishra referred to, and there, of course, tobacco smoking is the predominant cause, but prolonged exposure to certain types of air pollutants and indoor smoke from coal or biomass can also increase. Now, as far as smoking is concerned, it starts in our country very, very young. people do it more because of peer pressure, but the poor also have bidi smoking. They can't help it. They need something to relax, whether it's a cup of tea or it is a bidi. And therefore, in our country, the whole tobacco issue is a very highly political and emotive issue. When I was in the health ministry, I was trying to tell the then health minister, I said, "Sir, this is terrible that we are unable to do anything about it and we are allowing it to continue." To which his reply was, "Just go and meet Mr. Venkateswamy, the Minister for Labor, and try and convince him." And then I realized that Dr. Venkateswamy himself was eating gutka and talking to me. And he just laughed at what I had to say. He threw me out. So that was many years ago. After that, I must say that when I was in the health ministry, they started, I was in the health ministry, yes. They started in Delhi. Dr. Harshvardhan was the health minister, and he started this Tobacco Control Act. And we all in the ministry thought he was talking rubbish. It's not going to happen in India. Everybody smoked everywhere, in restaurants, in public transport, everywhere. We brought the law, and 25 rupees fine, 25 rupees was quite a lot of money in those days, had to be imposed by the police or by anybody who caught anybody smoking. You know, in those years when it came, 1998, it seemed before its time. It's not going to happen in India, but it has happened. So I want to give you the feeling that not everything is a basket case. If there is a political will behind it, a lot can be done. Many things are being done about vehicular emissions, and I must say those Bharat Stage 6 norms which were introduced, Government of India has been very strict about that, and they've come into effect from 1st April 23. A lot of people with older cars have had to give those cars up. That's fine. But I wouldn't say that that is going to, vehicular emissions is 15% definitely, but that's not going to make a sea change. What will make a sea change, as CNG did? I was chief secretary in Delhi. I'm not taking any credit for it. I was in a supervisory position. But the Supreme Court came down and said, for 5 years, you have done nothing to phase out diesel buses. And now all you officers will go to jail. I'm starting on this. This is what the Supreme Court judge said. And I remember that I had to go to Sheila Dikshit, the then chief minister, and tell her, "Madam, we are not going to jail because you want to be happy with the vehicle manufacturers and with the diesel run buses. We'll have to do something effective. Otherwise, we will go to jail, and we'll be happy to say that the politicians prevented us." So she took it seriously and she said, "All right, do whatever it takes." We had turmoil and chaos in Delhi. People were going in trucks. There was high going on all over the place. There were cascades on the buses were burning. We had bus bodybuilding going on in 36 different places in Delhi. Ultimately, it seemed unbelievable, and the credit must go not just to the officers, to the Indraprastha Gas Limited company, which brought the pipelines from HBJ pipeline. All this was fantastic, and we were able to ultimately to get the US Department of Energy to give us, they gave us, we didn't ask for it, the International Clean Cities Award for Delhi for CNG for having the highest number of environmentally friendly buses in the world. That is the prize we got. It was possible, but now we've again gone back. And the only way that this government can change it, the Delhi government, is by bringing more and more electric buses, making it possible for people to move from cars. And I have pleaded for the last 20 years, no politician ever listens. You do need a congestion tax for Delhi. People who come into the main arteries of Delhi and clog them, there has to be, charge them 5,000 rupees a day. They will all stop using and they'll move to public transport. But here the politics comes in. You want to be happy with the automobile manufacturers, with the rich people who do not want to use public transport. They want to go in chauffeur-driven cars. And you and I also would much rather be in our own car than public transport. But metro is a shining example. Electric buses, if they take over, particularly the way Singapore has done it, you make it so exorbitantly costly. It's impossible then for people to afford to be in a car during the hours of 10 to 6. You can use it in the evenings. So the chief guest has come, and I don't want to take too much time on this issue, but I do feel that Another area is road dust, which is extremely important, construction dust, which is extremely important. Governments and municipalities are doing something. We can see shields going up when construction starts. We can see pavements being a little less dusty, but nothing like what I saw in Bangkok. When I'd gone there recently, hardly 2 months ago, I found that every pavement and roads were being squirted with water religiously from 7 in the morning till 8 in the morning, which kept the dust down. We're doing no such thing. So that dust, when the Andhi comes, when the big dust storms come, that is all stuff that we inhale. It is possible to do something. We're not doing it. So having said all this to you, all that I can say is that finally, the only issues which I can raise from a policy point of view is, one, to spend more money, time on concentrated public awareness, building public awareness of the preventive side of stopping these lung infections which are going to come. Number two, it is very important to look at the totality of parali burning, the burning that goes on in Punjab and Haryana during the winter months. It is because farmers have a very small window between the end of the paddy sowing and the beginning of the kharif sowing, and they have to somehow clear the land. The only way they do it is by doing parali burning. Now, Punjab government is supposed to have gone and ordered, or is already having 1.7 lakh mechanized things for removing the residue. I don't know how far that's going to help, because that's for 3 weeks in the year. Where will all that mechanized stuff, huge machinery, where will it lie for the rest of the year? I don't know. The better thing is to change and diversify. We keep saying it, but why don't we do it? We don't do it because we are so keen to grow paddy, which is giving enormous export earnings, and we're able to export that rice. From a business and trading point of view, that is wonderful. From the point of view of health, if we don't diversify and we keep on having paddy growing, we'll keep on having this residue burning. People may get jailed and arrested and whatnot, but the fact remains, you and I will be smelling that the entire NCR and Delhi is a mess during those periods. And that totality, is export earning more important, or is the health of your population more important, is not being addressed by anybody. National Institute of Hydrology had pointed this out in a study which shows how much this is causing a problem, not from the point of view of pollution. They were on the pollution in the river Yamuna because the underground water has been drawn to such a large extent in Punjab and Haryana. And to finish what I have to say, finally, I do feel that from a policy point of view, behavioral aspects are extremely important. I talked to a few doctors whom I know before coming here, not high-powered doctors like Dr. Mishra, just the run-of-the-mill doctors who look after people who go to an OPD, and some in private, some in government. And their reaction was, do you know, most people come here with this kind of congestion, asthmatic conditions, all that. The children are already on smoking and vaping, number one. Number two, what is happening is that people do not want to confront tuberculosis and take the whole dose. They take it till they feel fine and they give it up. And the third thing that they said is that all these conditions are showing much more among women and children. If that is their view, it's not a survey, it is their reaction to the kind of people they see in the OPDs. The policy point of view is, if people are not made aware of how they can and how they must, it's essential to prevent these situations from arising. And medication and popping pills is not going to help anybody in the long run. So I've given you a little food for thought, and I hope that there's somebody, at least we have a leading member of parliament, he is listening and will do something about it. Thank you.